Raise your hand if your grandparents have ever handed you their phone and asked you how it works. Yes? We've all experienced this strange phenomenon. My grandma asked me a few years ago to help her start an online store. She's been in business for 40 years, but she's still using Windows 98. So I was very happy that she asked me to help her leap forward in technology by 20 years in sort of a single bound. And we're sitting in her office, and I suddenly realized, you know, I've never started an online store before. And Grandma even knows that I've never started an online store before. But how come I'm the one who has to figure this out? I don't know how that happened in her brain. Like, I've never done this before, I've got it. I'll call someone else who's also never done it, and she will know what to do. That had to be very strange for my grandma as well, because when she was growing up, the information that makes the world work was in the hands of whoever had been learning it the longest. You spend 40 years in an industry, and by then you have mastered it, and you know enough to evolve the industry and take it forward. But here's a phrase you may not have heard for 10 minutes. Technology has changed all that. Technology has disrupted everything we do, to the point that mastering something is just a disadvantage waiting to happen, because it's only a matter of time before you have to unlearn it and learn the new way that we do things. And that technological turnover is happening faster and faster, to the point that now the information that makes the world work is in the hands of whoever can learn it the fastest. You guys. And this is exciting, because we don't have to spend 40 years in an industry before we change it. We can change it now when we arrive. In fact, I was only invited to arrive at my grandmother's business for the purpose of changing how it worked. Figuring it out is how we do things now. It has replaced memorization and mentorship as our primary way of gaining new information. I had a college professor try to tell me that using the internet was lazy research. He said, I want you to go to the actual library and talk to the actual people at the research desk. And they have PhDs in library science. You need to talk to them, they're irreplaceable. So I went to the PhDs and I told them what I was working on, and they said, that's nice. Have you heard of Google? They told me to go and Google it. Even the experts agree that asking a person for information is inefficient, when we can go to the internet and we can just figure it out. Until this happens. Hey Siri, what was it about Grandpa that convinced Grandma he was the one? Alexa, how do I walk in peace when the whole world is at war? The information that really makes the world work is still in the hands of those who have been learning it the longest. My grandma's online store is doing great. And it's not because it's online. It's because she has spent 40 years learning how to take care of her customers and craft a beautiful product. How to ship orders on time even when things happen and life tries to get in the way. We live under an illusion that we have access to all information all of the time, when the reality is the information that we really need, the information that counts, much of it is stored in the memories of our elders. And that's kind of a fickle storage system, if you think about it. And how do we even access that? Well, the way that elders used to pass on their knowledge, the way that they've done it forever, has historically been referred to as the oral tradition, meaning it was spoken to us in stories and in poems. It was sung to us in songs. And I'm not just talking about any elders here, okay? Because I can already tell some of you are going, I can Google what old people say. Like, that's a thing I can do. It doesn't work that way. It's not the same thing. My grandma's story can inspire you, but it's not going to become part of your identity because she's not your grandma. She's my grandma. Are you following me? Do you see that very important distinction between someone's family legacy and your family's legacy? Your identity doesn't start from scratch. It starts with knowing the stock that you come from. And although we should not allow the past to exclusively define us, I would argue that the past has more influence over your decisions if you don't know what it is. If you don't know that your family has a history of addiction. If you don't know that you're likely to trust people a little too easily. And frankly, how sad would it be if we didn't allow our grandparents' victories to become part of who we are? And the oral tradition, no, let me say that again. Oh, I remember. You can access archives all day long. You can find birth certificates. You can find death certificates. You can spit into a cup and find out all about your genetics. But the legacy of your elders, all their virtues and all of their vices, that lives in the stories. And the oral tradition is how we've kept those stories rolling from one generation to the next. Here's the problem. The process used to happen very organically. People lived near their grandparents, they lived with their grandparents, they spent a lot of time listening to these stories over and over again. But here's that phrase again, say it if you know it, technology has changed all that. With urbanization, families are typically a little more spread out. We don't see our grandparents nearly as often. And the nature of conversations has changed. We communicate on completely different platforms from each other. We don't talk. We generate content. We don't listen. We consume content. We don't spend nearly as much time in each other's presence being silent. That golden, golden silence that draws out the truths that are shy, that are hard for people to say. So my generation sees this problem and we go, well, we want the stories. And our grandparents have the stories, but they're not very good at using the technology that we use to communicate, and it's making us panic. And we're going, we have to fix this, and we're trying to fix it the only way that we know how to fix things. We built an app. We built another platform. Tech-based solutions are popping up left and right because we're desperate to save the stories, but we're forgetting to include the generation that has the stories in this solution. The way our grandparents talk and the way that we listen don't connect super well anymore. And our solution needs to not be change the way they talk. It needs to be change the way we listen. We are not invited to arrive at the oral tradition as frayed as it is and disrupt it. We are invited to participate in it the way that it is now. After we got Grandma's online store up and running, I asked her if we could look at family photos. And I just took a digital recorder and I turned it on, set it on the table, and we forgot that it was there. And for 2 hours, I recorded the stories that naturally came to her as we were looking through family photos. And I learned that her grandpa was a mechanic and he had his own shop and it failed because he didn't have the heart to charge people for the work that he did for them. He just couldn't find it within himself. So he opened a motel where people pay when they walk in without even being asked. I learned how damaging it can be when favoritism is shown towards one child and not the other. I learned how long a grudge can last. I learned that my great-great-aunt went skydiving for her 80th birthday. And with each of these stories, a little part of me just kind of made more sense now. It was like these people who I had never met were talking to me and telling me things that were important, things they wanted me to remember about who I am. So here's my idea worth spreading. The oral tradition will be disrupted. It has to adapt. It has to evolve. But not yet. It's frankly not our turn. We can only change the way we pass on our legacy. If we keep trying to fix that frayed connection with technology, it could break, and then we would lose everything, because we cannot pass on a legacy that hasn't been passed on to us. We have to be willing to receive our story inheritance on their terms if we hope to receive it at all. So can I just encourage you today to recognize that your grandparents' stories and the memories of your elders, they're full of the information that makes this world really work. They're a scaffolding for you to build your identity on, and they will not always be accessible to you. We can save this tradition. We can, but only if we wait until it's our turn to change the way that it works.